First thing you recognize when you arrive at DLI, I certainly did. I arrived in March of 2007, and at my pre-service training, I knew I was in a very different context. I had no military background, and here I was teaching at Lackland Air Force Base. And much like you're civilians, well, at least two of you are, and if you're teaching in a military context and you don't have a military background, there are a few things that you learn straight away. The emphasis on time, that when I was teaching at universities in the past, there's a kind of flexibility built into your schedules, and there was a certain amount of forgiveness when approaching meeting times and start times. Not so in a military context, and that's something you learn really quickly. We have really quite unforgiving schedules where you need to be on time at the right place, not just standing in the hallway when the bell rings, but seated or standing behind the podium and ready to teach when the bell rings. That is a culture shift for a lot of us. So that military context, learning about the chain of command, recognizing different levels of authority within the organization, and treating those different levels of authority with differential levels of respect and deference, and finding the right approach to everybody in an organization as large as this, where, to be honest, we're really a hybrid. We're civilian and we're military. So in our context, we quite recently, in the last 4 years, we shifted from a center to a numbered military unit. When that happened, it was really a shift from a more civilian-centric mission to a more military one. When that happened, we also saw an increased involvement of our military leadership in the decision-making processes of our organization. And it was a welcome shift, because we had increasingly, and we continue to today, to have a really good, healthy dialogue between the military side and the civilian side. And that has, I think, enriched our entire experience here. Because even though we're civilians, every one of us teaching in the classroom or supervising or anywhere in the organization, we recognize that we are serving a larger purpose to further security cooperation goals between countries, your country, my country. And in doing so, that is a purpose that each instructor should be aware of and be able to deliver in the classroom, be able to speak to and be aware of when they're teaching in the classroom. So those three pillars that I mentioned earlier, when I first arrived at DLI, I think this is great advice for whether you've been managing haven't yet started managing, or if you've been managing for 15, 20 years. I think you'd recognize these. At my pre-service training, I remember the trainer saying there were only 5 of us in our group, kind of a small group. And she said, there are 3 things you need to really get right here at DLI. If you really want to move with your career and you really want to make a mark, you need to, number 1, teach really well. That's the number 1 priority. And in fact, it's really true. 70% of our core document is teaching. That's right, every instructor, 70%. The other 30% are other things, admin and other special projects, that kind of thing. But 70% speaks to preparation for teaching and preparation to teach, actual teaching techniques and procedures. And the third one is to create a favorable environment for language learning. So it's true. And we have to have our priorities straight. You can't be all things to all people, so you need to prioritize. And for me, that advice to make sure that you teach really well, teach to the best of your ability, always rang true for me And I think it's excellent advice. So when you do your pre-service training, I know it seems like a rather, maybe it seems a little too ordinary, maybe, but I don't think it is. I think your instructors need to know what matters, and it helps if you know, as supervisors, let them know straight away what matters most. Second thing is, she said, make sure you get your admin straight. We do admin. We don't do a lot, but we do some. But it's important that you get it right. So attendance taking, doing student counseling records where you sit down with a student who's struggling or underperforming and you document that. It's important that instructors get that straight. They have to demonstrate that they know how to write a proper counseling record, that they take accurate attendance, that they enforce the rules in the classroom. Admin it's not a major part of what we do, but you quickly can tell when a person's not doing it very well. It can lead to real problems because the rest of the organization depends on the accurate administrative duties of the instructor. So that's the second thing. So that's good advice, right? So the first one is teaching excellence. The second one is to get your admin straight. And the third one, have good interpersonal relationships with everybody. Yeah, it's remarkable. You know, we have something like 530, I believe, employees at DLI. So we're kind of a, I don't know, maybe a medium-sized company. I wouldn't call it small, and yet it feels small. And you can work here a very, very long time and get to know everybody. And you come to work every day for years and years. You meet people. Suppose you have a bit of interpersonal friction with somebody. You need to recognize that memory may stick out there in the wider workforce, and you don't want that to be what people know you by. So I think the advice to have good interpersonal skills with absolutely everybody in the organization is terrific advice. So those are the three pillars that I think you can it doesn't answer everything, but I think it's an excellent start. I think it's really good advice, particularly if you were like me, brand new 11 years ago. This is the organization of the English instruction flight. And a couple of things that you notice here are, first of all, if you look at the top part of the graph, you'll see that we are under a military command. We have an 06, a colonel in charge of DLI at the group level. Beneath that, at our squadron level, there are 3 squadrons at DLI. We are the largest squadron. Ours is the 332nd, and it is a training squadron. TRS stands for Training Squadron. There are 3 flights, and ours is the largest flight, naturally, because we do all the teaching. So ours, the English instruction flight, is composed of these 4 sections. So they're rather large, as you can see. Each section has approximately 7 or 8 supervisors. And within, all except the advanced English section, yours, the one that you're currently studying and is a little smaller. But it's made up, if you notice over here, it's made up with an overseas element. The advanced English section has, until recently, had responsibility for our instructors who have been deployed on language training detachments, LTDs. These are long-term assignments overseas, and you can see how many we have currently. There are quite a few. The other 3 sections are composed of between 50 and 60 instructors each. So they're large, and they're, I think by any standard, those are large sections, and this is the way that they're broken down. You might recall from the over the introduction that I talked about values, leadership values. And the first one was the excellence in teaching. And there are a couple of ways that you can get this across. And I think one way is, and I point to the center of this slide here, in this particular, we'll call them lines of effort. In this line of effort, teaching excellence is something that I think you don't just pay lip service to. You don't just mention it once and then forget about it. I think it's something that you make a kind of routine priority in your line of work, so that you talk about it frequently, you communicate about it, you make sure that your instructors in your section understand that what they're doing takes the highest priority in your organization. And so that means basically making sure that your messaging is focused on your instructors, and your instructors feel valued. I think that's that might be number one, number two, and number three in priority. A lot of other things that I'm about to mention will be relatively less important compared to this, when you consider the core mission of your organization. I think there are other ways that you can communicate the priority of instruction. I think one way is to make sure that in your annual appraisals, that excellence in the classroom, excellence in teaching, is the thing that is most highly rewarded. So I'm not sure if you have an award process, but I think if you do, I think that communicating that very openly and very plainly, so that people understand what that there are standards of excellence, and that these are always going to rank highly in your award process. I think that is a great way to telegraph to your organization that it's, how important it truly is. All training should also be aligned with this priority, this focus on excellence in teaching. That means when given a choice between, supposing there are trainings that focus more on culture and other aspects that may be a little bit may overlap with the main mission, but maybe a little bit, maybe possibly separable from it, we will always choose the main focus on English language teaching. That has always, in my opinion, and this is the approach that we're taking currently with the selection of training and deciding on which trainings to invest money in. We focus on trainings that will be best gauged to help our workforce, to help them as instructors. And we'll see. It's only been 2 years now that we've been doing this, but I think it's paid some dividends. It's helped our people to advance their teaching know-how, their teaching craft. The last feature on this kind of a value system of emphasizing excellence in teaching is to make sure that your supervisors, you yourselves, if you don't have a background in teaching, I think one thing you can do is, I don't know your specific situations, but if you do have a background in teaching, and it is your area of expertise, then you are very lucky and fortunate. That's not always the case. I've certainly taught a number of trainees in ALEC and in BALEC classes where they came from all walks, and their MOS, their specialty in the military, was not necessarily in teaching or teacher training. And I think that is a real shame, but I think it is a deficit that needs to be overcome somehow. And I think it's incumbent, it's important for the new supervisor to recognize that they need to develop. If they don't have a good eye for teaching, for quality teaching, they need to develop one. I can't emphasize this one enough. Supervisors need to be able to recognize good teaching when they see it. So if a supervisor is in observing a class, they should be able to recognize all of the techniques that are being executed. They should be able to recognize the logic of the lesson. If learning is happening, they should be able to see it, to be able to pick up on, to recognize the the outward manifestations of learning by observing the students and observing how the quality of their participation, how the materials are being delivered, how language is being practiced, where there were missed opportunities, because sometimes you'll have a great lesson, but there are missed opportunities that are very obvious to someone with a trained eye. So having a great eye for excellent instruction is crucial. So if you, now I think it also helps, there are obvious, I think a couple of other obvious corollaries of this, and one of them is that it allows you to have some credibility with your instructors. So if you've got the background and you can talk the talk, you've got that background, and you can speak from a vantage point of knowledge and background with your teachers, that will help cement your relationship with them as a fellow professional. That's big. This has a lot to do with the way we look at leadership development at DLI. So when we look at classroom instructors and we're thinking about future supervisors, we consider this. Does the person speak competently and fluently about teaching? Do they know what they're talking about when they're talking about teaching? When they're talking just matter-of-factly in a conversation about teaching. They're not yet a supervisor, and we're talking with them. When supervisors talk with them, do they speak competently about what goes on in the classroom? That's a very good start. A lot of our instructors in the advanced English section, obviously they have a love of teacher training, so that's a good start. You know, that's one of the things we look for. Do you enjoy training others and talking about the art of teaching, the craft of teaching? So a lot of it begins right there. Now, side by side with this, we talked about excellence in teaching, but we're trying to develop the entire person, you know, the entire instructor, and we've recognized that side by side with the delivery of ESL, there is a perhaps equally important aspect to what they do in the classroom, and that is knowledge about security cooperation, knowledge about the wider purpose for why they're teaching in the first place in this military context. So what we've done in the last few months, and we're going to continue into early 2019, is we have introduced a few new projects that we hope will bear some fruit in the future. We're pretty excited about these. One of them is we believe that our instructors will take a new, perhaps a newfound or an added delight in teaching, interest in teaching, if they are afforded, if they are presented with additional resources in the classroom. One resource we want to furnish them with is country fact sheets. So a country fact sheet, what is that? Well, for every student represented in a given classroom, let's say general English. Let's suppose you have a general English classroom with 7 different countries represented. In our current project, our current effort, we would like to introduce country fact sheets summarizing the security cooperation challenges of that country, the current security cooperation arrangements between the United States and that particular country, facts regarding the country's political structure, economic features, major economic features, geography, demographics, a kind of snapshot of the country that would give the instructor additional information that they can use when interacting in the classroom with that student from that country. We want to put some of that information at the instructor's fingertips. So when they, Monday morning, when they have their new class, this isn't the case in advanced English because every Monday you've got the same teacher, it's ongoing for 9 weeks. But in general English it's quite different. Every week there might be new students in the class, or you might have a different instructor. So when the class begins on Monday morning, they open up their roster, they pull down their roster, they go to take attendance, and there would be buttons with these country summaries that they could press and call up, they could download. They would look at these, use them or not, they would be free to choose how they wanted to use these, but the all-important thing that I want to convey here is that we're trying to empower instructors to use or not, to use the information in the classroom. And I think it will have a very healthy, I think it will result in some really healthy exchanges in the classroom, because you know, we have students, we talk about background knowledge, and we often think of family and certain personal experiences when we talk about background knowledge. Yeah. But I think we often forget that background also includes your the context from which you come, the historical, geographic, national context, and also it'll allow us to speak to the for some classes where it's appropriate to be able to talk about security cooperation. Again, if it's appropriate and if it's aligned with the objectives of the class. So that's in the works. We are doing that, and it's so does that promote excellence in teaching? Does that belong there? I think it does, because I think it should motivate some of our instructors. We already know that some instructors find that to be enormously attractive already, enormously stimulating already. We also have another project in mind where we are pulling together some instructors who will focus on security cooperation in a more sustained way. So they will be brought together to study up on the subject and to consider in a deeper way, in a much deeper way, the relationship between the classroom and security cooperation. What we could do in the classroom to apply, to make use of knowledge of security cooperation in the classroom. We'll see what they come up with. This group has just started meeting this week, so it's really quite a fresh initiative. And again, I think that's it's quite motivating for our teachers. Finally, coaching. This is something that we've, it's been in the works for about a year now, and it's something that we are continuing to look at. We do not currently have a coaching program to essentially team up, pair up instructors with each other, or to have supervisors provide on an ongoing basis formative feedback to help instructors or to give advice to instructors, even great instructors. I mean, the idea here is that there is room for improvement for everybody. We're looking at that very seriously. We find the coaching, there are lots of different coaching models out there. And I think this is of particular relevance to you as supervisors and managers, because you want to, it goes with this telegraphing, this messaging of what's important in a program, and if you stand up a system for pairing your instructors with master instructors, you know, the more experienced senior instructors, or with peers whose purpose it is to observe and to note what is happening in the classroom. Lots of different models, as I say. You are starting a dialogue between and among your instructors about teaching, and that is always a good thing because it keeps the mind focused on what is most important. Well, workforce development, this was the second in those values, you might recall. The second topic. Workforce development is something that we're constantly thinking about here at DLI. You know, how do we cultivate leadership, great teachers? How do we cultivate a kind of the next generation of leaders at DLI? Every year, because we're a rather large organization, we have at the moment we have 188 instructors. Attrition causes every year 20 instructors to disappear. Where do they go? They retire. They resign. They get promoted. You get promoted, you're not teaching anymore, typically. They move, they transfer to another part of the organization. So just think about that. 20, and there's typically the direction is always out of instruction. So that pool of instructors shrinks by 20 instructors every year and needs to be replenished. So we hire, and this is the hiring that we've conducted last year and this year. In the spring of this year, we took on 20 new instructors, but we're still low. We're still, there's been a very, the process of movement, the movement in this organization has been a little more frenetic or hectic. There's been a lot more movement. And also, we have an increased burden placed on us by our overseas programs. We have many more mobile training teams, MTTs, that we need to feed and keep staffed. And that has caused a certain amount of stress for us, and we have increased the rate of hiring. So we took on 20 in the spring. We're going to take on 20 more in the spring of 2019, and 20 more, or possibly more than that, not sure. We'll see in the summer of 2019. So basically 50% more instructors than usual. But that's because of our increased demands. We also have an increased, at the moment, I'll get to that in the next, the bottom portion of this slide in a moment, but there has also been an increased number of students. Our student load has risen by about 30% compared to last year, 30 to 40% actually. However, in all of this, we're not just choosing anybody out there on the open market. We have, as it should be, we get the choice of some of the best people. We've had ratios of 8 to 1, 5 to 1. So for every position that we open, we might have 8 applicants, 5 applicants. And this is good. This means that we really have the choice of some of the best people out there. And that's a very good thing for DLI. Workforce development also means making sure that we have the right opportunities for people. And as I said earlier, our priority is it has to be teaching related. So TESOL and in-service training that focuses on teacher training is uppermost. It's what we dedicate most of our time to, and it's what we put the primacy of our energy into. We put it into the TESOL. TESOL is the trade organization for teachers of English as a second language. And it's a large organization, and they have a national convention every year, and we're dedicated to sending a large number of instructors to that. We do that almost every year when we can, and we're certainly going to for next March when the TESOL convention takes place in Atlanta, Georgia. We also have semi-annual training festivals twice a year. There was a while when we skipped them, but we have rededicated ourselves to having that semi-annually. And it's a training festival is where we close down the school for a couple of hours on a Friday, and students don't come to classes. We have a kind of early release, and that's for the purpose of attending a number of wonderful in-service trainings in classrooms. and it's all organized and everything is scheduled. And we find this to be very, I think it's really pretty uplifting for instructors. Instructors get a sense to demonstrate and share what they know, but it also gives an opportunity for others to get a glimpse into others, their peers' areas of expertise. If they have some advice that they think they can share with their coworkers, a special way to teach relative clauses, how to teach listening skills, some advice on how to teach listening skills, activities that work well for them, techniques that work well, we encourage them to share. So it's all about giving our practitioners, teachers, the floor. And we put all of our emphasis on that. In the past, there have been a variety of different presentation themes during our last training festival, and certainly in the spring. Our focus is going to be on three things. We have the three-part theme for our training festivals. Teaching within a military context, bringing a military context to your instruction, that's one. Technology in the classroom. So giving advice and sharing your success stories about how you've been able to incorporate technology in the classroom. And the third, of course, is teaching techniques, teaching procedures, what works for you. So because again, we never lose sight of that. We want to make sure that we really punch that message with everybody. Providing the right growth opportunities means giving people an opportunity. And I feel very strongly about giving our instructors opportunities that are sometimes only given to perhaps people of a higher pay grade, maybe supervisors. So I've made an effort. We have several special projects that we're doing at the moment, and I have laid down a kind of guideline. I've tried to delegate those positions, not positions, those, I guess, those special project slots to GS11s, and to delegate to them and give them the authority to either succeed or fail. Now, in point of fact, when you choose people and you've taken some time and you've really deliberated over your selections and you delegate, they're just not going to fail. They're always going to step up. And that's been my experience. That was my experience from the last training festival and a couple of other initiatives that we've undertaken. You delegate to people, you give them the guidelines. It's usually best to just step back and let them do their work. And we've been very happy with that. So we give them the guidelines, give them the resources that they need, set the sort of general principles to follow. And of course, there are non-negotiable guidelines that we give. There are certain guidelines that we need to have them follow. But once you've set those down, there's no need to be overly, to be in their business, to meddle or micromanage. So we pull back, we delegate. Give them the room to make decisions. And we're doing that with we've got 14 people currently on special projects, all of them GS11s. And I've worked with my chiefs and supervisors and really advised them to kind of stand back, give them these GS11s the space. They're taken off podium and given the opportunity to work on these projects, and they're doing just fine. I've been really, really happy with the results. The other thing is, when you're, in terms of talent development, giving people, take away rank, put people in a room, give them a mission, give them a purpose, just stand back and watch and see. They will self-select who takes the lead. They will self-select. And I think that process of letting people, just let them work it out, I think you'll see people, you'll see your team members step up, and a certain amount of, they will exercise certain leadership skills that will make them stand out and be obvious demonstrate some of those obvious leadership traits that you are in the. After all, you had set up the entire enterprise to do that, to see who would rise to the top, and you'll see that with small groups, and that's happening with these special projects. One endeavor that we're currently doing is to encourage all of our instructors to take a short training, a 2-hour training. This is in the interest of learning about security cooperation. And I consider this a workforce development project because it's a challenging computer-based training, CBT, computer-based training. It's a challenging training, and it gives our instructors a kind of common purpose and vocabulary for talking about security cooperation and the relationship between their work and the bigger security cooperation purpose. All employees want to know that you are adhering to a fair process. And as managers, if you're supervising or if you become leadership in your program, your employees and your unit members will want to know that you are exercising, you're adhering to, you're following procedures for selection that are fair and open. And I think this is really important. One of the I guess guidelines that I follow and I find I've always, since I discovered it a few years ago, find very enriching and very informative is the merit system principles, which can be found, I'll tell you where you can find them, in 5 U.S. Code, USC 2301. I got that memorized because I've read it. It's what we follow in the civil service. There are 9 of these principles, and the first one talks about fair and open competition. They're good principles. They're principles that if you don't follow something like this in your own context, it's probably a good idea that you follow them, because it's the notion that people can only apply for something if they are aware that it's available, that everyone should be on an equal, have the equal opportunity to apply for or to volunteer for an opportunity. You want to make sure that everyone has that equal opportunity, not equal results, because not everybody's equal. I'm not saying that. You'll have differential treatment for differential performance, but the opportunity to begin with needs to be equal and to be advertised openly and freely. I think that's, there are many occasions when I'm in my line of work and it comes across my desk, probably once a month, I'll see a very clear instance where we are not doing that, and we'll need to correct it. And we correct it, we catch it, and it just means communicating to your units, to your workforce, to make sure that they know that there are opportunities available. So advertising, using selection panels. Don't know if you do that, but I'm a big believer in that. A selection panel is an excellent way to get multiple perspectives. I also like to have the military involved. That wasn't always done in the past, but I like to have, I'll choose someone from the military. Typically it might be a senior NCO, non-commissioned officer, or it might be someone from an officer, but I'll ask them to participate because they give like fresh input and they have a fresh view. And actually what's really quite remarkable and sometimes is that they come into it cold. And what I mean by that is typically they have no idea about the actual candidates being considered for a particular opportunity. And you might think, well, that's absurd. Why would you choose someone who has no knowledge at all? Well, you do that because they bring their own background and priorities to a set of candidates. They haven't seen them. They have no background knowledge about those candidates, but they are judging based on the strength of what is written by the candidate or about the candidate by other people in the volunteer package. And that is enough for someone to give to make an impartial judgment on the fitness of that individual. And they're only one of several voices, so that it's not an overwhelming, they don't have an overwhelming vote. Everyone has one vote. But the nice thing about a selection panel is that it diffuses and gives variety to the process, so that you have a variety of voices weighing in, multiple perspectives. Rating blind. When I'm looking at volunteer packages, someone, I'm not sure exactly how you would do this in your own context, but we'll sometimes ask people to write narratives. Why would you like to do this? Why would you like to be a part of this team? Why are you a good candidate for this opportunity? You just tear off the name. Just tear off the name and just read what's left. And so we don't share the names, we just share the narrative. So you rate blind, that's rating blind. That's a very good idea, because you're really, that is an excellent way of detaching your personal, well, I guess biases, I suppose, and treating the narrative with I think all of the dignity that it deserves, that it's actually a sample of a person's best attempt to summarize how they are a good match for the opportunity. And as I say, rating blind is not something, that's one aspect. You might have, in the overall scheme of things in your rubric, you might have a number of different criteria. It is one data point that you would use. And I think having a number of data points and following procedures like these ensure that your best candidates are going to be selected. And having a more kind of generalized understanding of these procedures in your area, in your unit, or in your workforce also gives you a certain amount of assurance. It gives them a certain amount of assurance that their interests are being respected. Our training commitments at the moment, last year we had approximately 530 students. This year, right now, this is the actual number this week, 727. So we're pretty busy, and we're trying to cover as many classes as possible. So our student ratios have risen to almost 9 in general English. So the classes are full. Your classes, not so much. We don't have as much flexibility in advanced English. We can make and remake classes in general English, and we have taken advantage of that flexibility. We don't abuse it, though. We have caps. We do not go above 9 at the moment. To go above 9 in a class requires that we communicate with leadership and really, and then we would remove the cap, because currently it's capped at 9. But if we wanted to, if we really needed to, if things became very desperate, we could increase our class size to 10. We really don't want to do that. Do you really want to sit in a class of 10? I mean, 3 is better than 4, and 4 is better than 5. But 10, I think, it's really, and our classrooms are not really suited for such large classes. But if we need to, we can do it. And it's not mentioned here, but since this is the topic of allocating resources, 1 year ago we made the decision to remove all of our current desks because they're too big. Mm-hmm. You can only fit nine desks in a classroom because the desks are too large. So we decided to get rid of them, and so we've bought all new desks that actually can fit, so that 10 desks can fit in the classroom. And that will allow us, if we really need to, we could have 1,500 students. We're not going to have 1,500 students, but we could if things became really hot and heavy. The non-resident program, last year at this time, we had 30 instructors overseas. At the moment, we have 48. Just think about that. So we've got fewer teachers, more students, and a larger overseas commitment. So this has become one of our major struggles to cope with the demands. But we're meeting them. We're meeting them, and it's what we do. We work with our other flights. We work with curriculum, and we work with testing to make sure that our staffing needs are met. So our classrooms are covered, and everyone understands that's central to what we do here at DLI. What I'm about to show you here is the bigger purpose, why we teach. In the 1940s, during World War II, there were a Hollywood director, Frank Capra, made a series of short films called Why We Fight. And they were kind of propaganda films, and the purpose of them was the United States was very reluctant to enter into World War II. Frank Capra's movies, little short movies, which were shown at films, usually before films. Like you would go to watch a feature film, but Frank Capra's film would be shown first in movie theaters. And the purpose was to make sure that people really understood and appreciated what was at stake in terms of freedom and democracy and bigger issues that were worth fighting for. So Why We Fight was a series of films, and so I'm taking my cue from that with Why We Teach, because I think our instructors deserve I wouldn't say an equal. I mean, I don't think it's really that lofty, but I do think that instructors should also be aware of some of the larger perspective on why we teach, because what we do is enormously impactful on the rest of the world, and what you do as supervisors and managers in your programs is you are also in this enterprise of security cooperation and supporting national defense and security cooperation relationships, and it all centers on ability to communicate in the English language. And that's why, that's why you might hear something like this. Or this. Or this. Or this. I think it's worthwhile for instructors to be aware of how teaching relative clauses and syntax and good pronunciation relates to these larger themes.